Great. So what is this time of year for the comedy festival? Like everything's starting, everything's going on sale. Is it chaos?
It's total chaos. We have a lot of new or returning staff who do those kind of seasonal contracts coming back,
Hmm.
which is great. And some new people. Not everybody comes back every year, but it's a time where everyone's registering their shows.
Hmm.
So there's a million questions about that. Everybody's trying to find a venue. Things are going on sale, getting ticketing builds done, copy written, still trying to lock down a number of deals,
Hmm.
still dealing in terms of things that I do. There's still quite a bit of juggling
Yeah, what does an
of
average
venues.
to-do list look like that you wake up to it? Like, what does it look like? What are your duties?
It's, get back to whoever's still hanging out for those, 10 past 6 in the meeting room at Trades Hall who wants that spot.
Uh-huh.
And dealing a lot with overseas agents and managers and stuff. And at the moment, it's drives us insane this week because all the Americans go off and eat turkey and have Thanksgiving and everything and just completely shut up shop for a week at our most busy time when it's like, are they coming or not? Is your client coming or not? What's going on?
Yeah, and just sometimes just needing that simple yes or no answer,
And
and then
they're
I can
just,
move on to the next thing.
yeah, they're away with the pixies.
Does it
And
feel familiar? Like, do you feel like every year it
oh,
feels
yeah.
familiar? Like, oh yeah, we're
Yeah.
back here.
Total Groundhog Day. And what's really interesting this year, usually the British and Irish comedians and their management teams are actually very easy to deal with because, of course, they've grown up doing Edinburgh. They absolutely know how it all works. And so
Hmm.
that's great. But this year, you've probably heard, and everybody knows that they're doing launching a British Saturday Night Live,
Oh yes,
SNL.
yes, yes, yes.
And so a lot of the people that we work with and have made offers to and have been talking about with are waiting for an SNL offer or have received one and are trying to get a better deal because apparently the deals are really shit.
Uh-huh.
Um, so quite a few things that we would normally just have locked and loaded and ready to go are hanging on. And of course, if they do get a deal and decide to accept it, I've got these gaping holes in venues in quite sought after
Do you have
spots and
like some
stuff.
sort of like people that are waiting on the bench or whatever? Like
Oh,
I've got a B team ready to go.
yeah, not a B team. They're all A's, but it does, yes, you have to do a bit of a shuffle. You kind of shuffle everybody up in capacity sizes and stuff
Yeah,
like
I,
that.
I
So you're
got
ready
this.
for
I
that.
I have a limited experience. I used to run a few venues in Adelaide back
Mm,
in the day, the Producers Hotel and the Wine Centre, and it was that thing of
mm,
going,
uh-oh.
what if they pull out, or what if they move, or what? Why have they sent yes, yeah? And it occupies my whole brain. Are you good at being off the clock, or is this time of year it's 24/7?
I don't think I've been off the clock for 30 years.
Well, let's jump on that thing because being in any job, let alone director of the comedy festival for 30 years, what is it to I mean I'm asking you to compare yourself to someone's life you haven't lived, but
Yeah.
the same role for 30 years, what's that like?
Well, people often ask about that, but the thing is, it has changed an enormous amount because when I joined the comedy festival, there were like 4 staff,
Mhm.
um, and we would do the registration programming list on an Excel spreadsheet. We didn't have a website. So it has changed enormously in my time. So
It keeps it interesting, I
that
assume.
really does keep it interesting. So, like things that have emerged, things that I've been working on this week. We've got our Deadly Funny workshop and performance thing that's going all around Australia. We've got that happening and all being locked in for next year. Going to thanks to Josh, our creative producer on that. Of course, but that's going to 3 times the number of places it's ever been to before. And raw comedy has become massive, and class clowns has become
Mhm.
massive, and all those things have changed. We've been doing a lot of work with the Indian industry because comedy in the last 10 years in particular has just gone insane in
Yeah, and
India.
those shows keep blowing up.
Yeah.
While we're at Raw Comedy, we judged a heat
Yes.
together last year, which was fun. There are, I work with a lot of comedians who are starting out. They're in their Raw Comedy
Yeah.
years, they're in their Raw years, and the amount of crystal ball, divining tea leaves, trying to figure out
Mm.
what goes on in the judge's head. Let's try and ease their troubles once and for all. What is going through your head when you're judging the raw comedy heat?
Well, you want to laugh, you want to be surprised, so you want authentically original material
Hmm.
where that comes from that person's life that no one else can do because only them have lived that life. Um,
There'll be these certain myths that go, oh, I know I'm going to be written off as soon as I swear once.
oh
The
no,
judges will hate that, and I'll lose all opportunities.
no, that's
These are myths, right?
a swear is not going to lose you an
Is
opportunity.
is there anything, just speaking generally in terms of your taste, raw comedy or just comedy in general, or art in general, that is just like, oh, I don't care for that, or I've seen that enough times, or that couldn't be more hack.
It's really hard, isn't it? Because I often say comedy is the most subjective art
Hmm.
form. And when with my colleagues at the office, we get on really well and we'll all love stuff. And then we will completely disagree on one artist or something where it's like,
Hmm.
you're kidding.
Yeah,
They're
someone's
so not
favorite
funny.
would be the
And I'll be like,
least. Yeah.
what do you mean they're not funny?
Yeah, I get that entirely, which is why I try and assure comedians that are starting out and trying to read the minds of the
Yeah.
judges that you just simply cannot.
You can't please
Mm,
everyone. And
mm,
that's why we have a mix. We have a really good, on all the things in the festival that involve judgments. We have, I think, a really good mix,
mm.
and no one ever agrees. Like every year with the Comedy Festival Awards, when the judging panel meets for the first time, I always say to them that at least one of you is going to have a broken heart at the end of this process because, I remember the year Maria Bamford won, icon. Clearly, I love her.
Truly.
There was one judge who just did not think she was funny and could not believe that she had won. So that,
Yeah, wow.
you know, and this was an experienced comedy person.
Do you ever have to like field emails, or is all this just happening in green rooms and at comedy festival, like that the at the comedy bars in the little corners of people going, "Oh, I heard about this or I heard about that." Of just like the
There is
dissenting
that, but
voices of, "Oh, it's all rigged and it's all like like there's always
uh,
these little myths behind the
yeah,
scenes.
we get emails. We get emails. Yeah, there's always people who think, I don't know, there are people who think that I've single handedly stymied their careers, which is just such rubbish because I have, ab- you know, television, radio, all those things that really make people's
You are not
careers. I do not.
you are here to reveal that
I
you are not a puppet master of
I
everyone's
am
comedy career.
absolutely not. And we have as I've said, quite diverse opinions within our team at the office. And also, we all spend our lives talking to comedians and agents and managers and comedy
How do you feel
workers.
having people think of you as this sort of this grand power behind the scenes who's orchestrating? Like, is that a weight on your shoulders that people would think those sorts of
Uh,
things, or are you happy to have that sort of reputation?
no, I kind of
Mm,
wish that just because it's not true, I
mm.
wish that people didn't bother with it.
You don't. So okay, there's no chalkboard in the office that says whose careers am I making this
Yeah,
year.
yeah, no. Definitely, definitely that is not there is no such
I want to hear about who you were going into this job 30 years ago.
all
Like, do
right.
you like who were you then?
I started out, my involvement in comedy started at the Last Laugh Theatre Restaurant on Smith Street in Collingwood.
Hmm.
And John Pinder and Roger Evans, who that was kind of an iconic venue.
Tell me
So
about
many
the last
people
laugh.
started out there. Well, it was kind of where people like Brian Nankervis and Richard Stubbs and Peter Rosethorn and Gene Kitson, like all kinds of people were like waiters or
Hmm.
did stuff there. Anthony Morgan, um, most of the waiters were aspiring comedians. It's where
As most waiters ought to be.
most waiters ought to be. It's they John and Rod were really ahead of their time, and they brought um, people like the comic strip, into Australia before they were really even famous in the UK. And they, along with the guys who ran the Universal Theatre, uh, started the Comedy Festival in 1987.
And was there much of a comedy scene around the place
Yeah,
beyond
there
those
was.
venues?
different to now. It was much more, people like Rod Quantock and Mary Keneally and their mates had the Comedy Cafe on Brunswick Street, and John, before he started the Last Laugh, had another venue on Brunswick Street, the Flying Trapeze Cafe, where a lot of amazing people started out. And there were a few other venues, and my brain is very fried today, so I can't remember. But no, there was quite a scene, and things like the architecture review at Melbourne Uni, which is where Rod Quantock and people like Steve Izard and all kinds of people came out of that, and the law review. So there was quite a scene. But so there was the Prince Pat Hotel.
And were you ever stepping on that stage? Were
Oh
you
God,
someone with
no.
a secret desire to
No,
perform?
no. When I was at uni, at Melbourne Uni, I did. I worked with Melbourne Uni Student Theatre, but I made the costumes and
Hmm.
was a props person and
So was it
a
always the
stage
dream to go,
manager.
I want to be valuable behind the scenes? What
Yeah.
was the dream?
Yeah, no, I really liked putting things on stage. So I did that while I was at The Last Laugh. I got to know the Circus Oz people because John and Roger started them in the early parts of their career. So I basically ran away with the circus for 8 or 9 years and travelled the world with them.
What was that lifestyle like?
That was amazing. I got to go to all kinds of places everywhere and saw, the inside of many emergency departments from, Edinburgh to New York,
From like what circus?
from
It-
people injuring
oh my
themselves,
goodness.
as happens in
That
circus.
becomes your role, is to escort people to the
Yeah,
emergency room?
yeah, because I was the tour manager and then the general manager, but that was amazing. And
I've heard a bone break. Let's go. Wow.
so, so I learnt a lot. I travelled a lot. It was extraordinary. I was really, really lucky to have that experience.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have that range. It's also just so nice and refreshing to hear someone who's working behind the scenes as a young person and not going, but when I get on that stage, or this is all it means to an end,
No.
so I can be in that spotlight myself, to
Oh,
just
no.
go, here is what I want to be doing. I want to be facilitating this experience and
Yeah.
making it happen.
Yeah.
Were you so you find yourself in the circus world, was it always comedy for you, or was it just always, I love performance and comedy happened to be that style of performance that you found yourself in?
I think that's the style of performance I found myself in. When I left Circus Oz, I left because I got offered a job at the State Theatre Company of South Australia, and I'd come down with glandular fever while we were on tour in Brazil and Venezuela and Colombia in South America, and I was just exhausted, and I thought, I can't go back on tour. So I went and did this job for a year at State Theatre Company, which was great because I learnt a lot about theatre, about putting on plays and working with some of Australia's best playwrights and directors, and like my hero Jim Sharman, who directed the first Rocky Horror Show
Oh, wow.
and Jesus Christ Superstar and those things, which were things that I saw when I was at high school. And they were things that made me think, I want to work in showbiz, because I just loved those things. And remember the first time I worked with Jim at State Theatre Company, he was the director of one of our plays. I was so starstruck. Like, I was meant to be organising things for him and making sure that he was in the right place at the right time and introducing him to his tech crew and all of that. And I could, I was just
You're just there as a
starstruck.
fan,
I was total fangirl. Yeah.
which is must happen all the time. Or have you gotten better at being able to go, all right, there's someone who's a huge celebrity that I'm a fan of, but I'm playing the
Yeah.
role of director, or I'm playing the role of the boss here.
I'm still in awe of, people who are amazing.
Does that still, yeah,
think,
so that still keeps happening? Because it'd be a shame
Yeah.
to lose that magic once it
Oh,
becomes sort of an everyday thing.
no, it would be, I would never want to lose that because, I think comedy artists are extraordinary because their audiences think that and I mean, because, you're a comedian, that you just get on stage and make it up.
Hmm.
And I don't think so many audiences don't understand how much work goes into it, and every word is in a particular order because you have tried it in every other order and you have arrived at
Yeah,
what is
yeah.
the funniest and what works and what creates the most tension and then the biggest laugh kind of thing. And I think it's just an extraordinary skill because, and also, artists, particularly I think Australian and British performers and Irish performers, the way most of them create a new hour every year. Often the
Yeah.
Americans I deal with and the Canadians, they think, well, that to them is like a new hour every year. That's a bit much,
Yeah, that's wild.
That's wild.
Are you
Um,
seeing that trend shifting though?
Yeah, it is because what I have seen, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, more and more Americans and Canadians are going to Edinburgh, and it's a
Mhm.
real eye opener for them. I think some of them are held back, I think, a lot by their agents because their agents are just there's no money in that. You're going to lose money, and the
Mm.
artists who will go and do Edinburgh, you think they are in it for the love of the craft. It's not about making a fortune because we all know it's very rare to make your fortune on your first show in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Um, and those people are more likely to come to Melbourne because it's not about making a huge amount of money. It's about the camaraderie, the audiences, the opportunity to do your show night after night for 4 weeks, get better at what you do,
Treat it
build
as a sort of
relationships with
comedy
other.
gym. Yeah, the
Yeah,
networking is huge.
yeah,
Are
it's
you going
amazing.
over to Edinburgh and scouting?
I
Is that part of
usually
it?
do every year. Yeah, it's become quite a. I went the first time with Circus Oz. Well, actually, I went before I was with Circus Oz. I went when I was working at the Last Laugh, and Los Trios Ringbarkers were the first Australians to ever win what was called the Perrier Award then,
Oh,
which was
wow.
pretty exciting.
And I guess you've then been able to watch Edinburgh evolve over the years
Yeah.
as well. What have
Oh,
you
yeah.
noticed? Like, do you feel like festivals like Melbourne and Edinburgh evolve in a similar sort of style, or
Yeah.
How is Edinburgh evolving versus how is Melbourne evolving?
Well, Edinburgh to start with is so much bigger. They sell over 2 million tickets. It's just crazy. What has really changed in Edinburgh is when I first started going to Edinburgh, theatre was the largest because it's multi-genre. Theatre and like music were the largest things, and comedy was smaller. And that has
Hmm.
completely reversed. And now comedy is by far the largest
And
genre.
I also noticed too that even if what might previously have been put into a theater category of the
Yeah.
guide, people start going, "Oh, well, we are doing a
Uh,
play, but it's a funny
it's
play,
funny.
so let's put it in the comedy
Yeah. Get more
section,"
audience.
which I
Yeah.
think sort of disrupts the whole
Yeah.
nature of
Does a
having
bit.
a guide.
Yeah.
Cabaret artists do a similar thing. They'll go,
Yes. Yeah.
let's put ourselves in the comedy section.
Yeah.
The comedy section just starts getting fatter and fatter as a
Yeah,
result.
yeah. I worry about Edinburgh. You've probably heard this. The cost of accommodation now is insane.
Mm.
You used to be able to get a nice share house or apartment in Edinburgh in a nice old building, centrally located, and it was totally affordable. And now since COVID, it like literally has doubled in cost, and so many people now can't afford it. In Edinburgh, everyone did the 4 weeks. You didn't
Yeah.
go to Edinburgh and do a whip or 2 weeks. It just wasn't done. Whereas now, so many people are doing just 2 weeks,
'Cause it's
or
what they
perhaps
can
doing a week.
afford.
That's all they can afford, and fair enough. And I think the council is mad to have allowed all of the various rules and regulations that have generated that to just run wild because they are killing, the golden goose. It's just
Yeah,
mad.
it's like with just rentals in general.
Mm.
If there's no regulation, people go, all right, I'm going to keep upping these
Yeah.
prices, and
Yeah.
oh, people keep paying them, so I'll keep
Yeah.
upping these
It's
prices.
not going to go backwards.
Mm.
And some of the big venues have done deals with Edinburgh Uni and have got quite reasonable rates for student accommodation at Edinburgh Uni, where the students go home for the break. And they're fine, but they're very Spartan. And as someone was telling me a while ago, that's the most uncomfortable bed I've ever slept in my life. Um,
When the one thing you really need during Edinburgh is some
yeah,
rest.
where
Yeah,
one of the joys of Edinburgh used to be that you got to stay in this fabulous old, Victorian apartment or Edwardian apartment with, big high ceilings and a bit of vibe.
yeah, yeah. And no, it's all dorms now,
Yeah,
and I
it's all
hope you're
done.
happy to share.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Speaking
very
of the
different.
difference between pre-COVID
Mm.
and the post-COVID, COVID being the only time that Melbourne Comedy Festival was cancelled, which just between you and me, I was happy about because I could not afford to do comedy festival that year. I was really in debt. It actually worked out well, but I know it would have been a nightmare behind the scenes to
Yeah,
have to pull the plug on the festival.
yeah, it was awful.
What are you seeing? One thing that I noticed after COVID, the year that we came back and had the small, less international
Mm.
comedy festival, was there are so many shows where people were doing, let's just have as much silly fun as
Yeah.
possible in this show. Have you noticed any other like cultural changes or significant changes in behavior from the post COVID world?
Um, I do look back on that 2021 festival. That was a lovely festival with no overseas artists and just Australians, and very small, and everybody sold out because audiences were so thrilled to
Yeah.
come out, and
And
there was
half capacities in
yeah,
a
and
lot of
half
places as well.
capacities. Yeah, it was actually a really lovely, apart from everyone Well, actually, no, that 2021 one, people weren't so much getting sick, and it was before the vaccination. Then it was the next one, 2022, where everyone just kept getting sick and dropping like flies.
Which is also so tricky
Mm,
too that artists have very little recourse in those
mm.
situations. Because I'll hear comedians anecdotally, they'll go, "Oh yeah, I was so sick, but I had to put on my show
No, they have,
anyway." And you're
yeah,
like, "Oh
no sick pay.
yuck." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no,
It's rough.
it's
But it
tough.
was wasn't it so lovely when people were like, "Oh my God, how precious it is
Mm,
to have a live performance and look
yeah,
at us occupying space." Do you
yeah.
feel like people are still recognizing that?
Oh, absolutely. I think I've been thinking a lot about AI lately,
Hmm.
and that's one of the things that AI can't take away. It can steal from artists as much as it's allowed, which seems to be everything.
Yeah, the
But
government has allowed for that.
yeah, but it can't take away live performance,
Mm.
and nothing beats being in a room with an audience and watching a live show. And with comedy, that live show is going to be different every night, even
Yeah.
if, yes, the artist is not making it up on the spot because they have worked it out. It is still different depending on the audience response and on their mood and what might have happened that day and little bits. Every performance is unique, and that, hopefully will never change.
It's a precious thing, and it
Yeah.
is so lovely. I just recently was listening to a comedian say that they had an audience member come back the following night and went, "Hey, all the material's the same." It's like, yeah, yeah, it's the same show. Speaking of AI, and there'll be a lot of me saying "speaking of" in this
Yeah.
episode, it seems, but like I've got AI anxiety.
Yeah.
Do you see a world where festivals will start taking a stance on AI in terms of the including it
Mm.
in your show, your artwork? I know that must be so tricky to have any sort of oversight, but
Yeah. How do
y
you judge that? I mean, we had a sponsor last year from a company who, an AI whatever company, and they created for us a thing to help people find shows. And at
oh,
first,
yeah.
I was very nervous about that and just thinking, because, my view is just read the bloody program, do
Mm,
some work, get a, yes, you won't love everything you go to, but most of the things maybe you will love. Take a punt. That's what the festival's for.
yeah.
But people always say, oh, the program's so big, we don't know what to go and see. Blah, 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 blah. So this was the Funny Finder, it was called, and they wanted to have a go at creating this kind of thing. And it worked quite well. Like there was a lot of work put into with all of us on staff making up questions to ask so that we could make sure that the answers weren't, they didn't just always answer the same thing
Mhm.
with the same shows, and
It's like,
that
just
there
go
was
see Luke
some,
Heggie,
yeah,
which is what I'm doing when I'm
that there
flyering my
was,
show. I go, "Just go see Luke, he's
yeah,
great."
that there was some nuance. But in terms of the creative stuff, it's very hard. I wouldn't want, I would hate it if I thought an artist was doing something that, because I mean, AI is kind of, I'll probably get yelled at for saying this, but it's kind of plagiarism, really.
Oh, it really
Is that
is.
the word?
It's everything's
Plagiarism.
stolen. These aren't they're not coming from nowhere. It's
No,
yeah.
no, it's someone, oh, who was it? Someone, I heard something on a podcast the other day, someone talking about, um, oh, I know who it was. It was Salman Rushdie.
Mhm.
Not funny. But he had gone onto AI and said, write me a chapter of a new book in the style of Salman Rushdie.
Yeah.
And he said it was absolute shit. It was sort of his voice, but it was total rubbish. So he kind of felt relieved that he
Yeah.
was never going to be threatened by that. But, I think of things like my partner is a musician, has been writing songs all his working life. And, that's the kind of stuff all musicians, their work has been without their permission, just mined
Yeah.
to teach these big AI machines without a hint of payment. And like, just because AI wasn't invented when copyright um, co- conventions were invented and
Mm.
copyright law was invented, they can get away with that, which is so
Yeah.
wrong. It should be, the law should be moving to keep up with, because that is,
They're so powerful. Like
yeah,
these are all helmed by billionaires,
yeah,
and that's why the art side of it I find is the most insidious because it's artists going, "Oh, this is just a little bit of novelty. Oh, look, I made a
oh,
cute little video. I made this or I made that." And they go,
yeah,
they want you to normalize it. They
yeah,
want you to think it's just this fun little thing
mm,
that's now
yeah,
replacing people.
yeah.
It's really creepy.
And I get that yes, in some jobs and things it can save time. and make things more efficient and stuff like that. But there are people out of work.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, and it's gonna happen more and more.
What are they meant to
Yeah,
do?
and it's
Um,
gonna come for the admin side of
yeah.
things
Oh,
as well. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I find it I find it a bit scary, and I find it scary for just ordinary workers whose jobs will disappear, and I find it scary for creative people who are not being paid the copyright or whatever it's
Yeah,
called in
there's
the AI
no
world
yeah,
that
no
they should be.
financial payment, like often torrented artists.
Mm.
So AI, COVID, these are both things like sort of in recent history
Yeah.
that have like influenced the arts and the comedy scene. 30 years,
Yeah.
there must have been moments where you're like, "Oh, this is changing." I guess
Yeah.
things like social media and
Social media.
people
Yeah.
are selling themselves online. And I suppose to connect that to like marketing in general of
Yeah.
like just being out there selling yourself, there was a time where the precious flyer
Yeah.
was everything. What are you seeing now as how like people are reaching their audiences?
Well, social media and uh online, digital advertising is it now, whereas 20, 30 years ago, I remember I used to spend every morning with the marketing coordinator, um, scribbling all over printouts of the back page of the EG for the Age,
Mhm.
our design for that, because every day with our Age sponsorship, we would have a page or a big, big adverts, and it was all about press advertising. And I can remember thinking, oh God, with when online and everything and papers started to disappear, so much cheaper now doing online. But of course, bullshit. It's just
Do you feel
there's
like it's
whole
a
new
lot
other
of
areas
noise
of
now? I feel like it's so
expense.
noisy though on social media that of
Well,
course there's so much digital advertisement now. There's a lot of just competition.
yeah, and you don't really know exactly what's going to work. Whereas in the old days, you'd print your posters, you'd take out your big ad in the Age or in the local rags, whatever, and see what happened. And whereas now it feels like you're just really throwing mud against a wall and you're not
Mm.
really sure what's going to stick. So you have to try so much. And so it's not cheaper. It's incredibly labor intensive because, I've got this, a staff member who's pretty much devoted to just creating social media tiles and stuff and creating content for social media. Um, yeah. So
It is a lot of
it's,
just experimentation,
it
isn't
is
it?
absolutely.
And I think as well, there's never a one size fits all
Mm,
approach. One thing though, like I feel that there is some level of coming back to some of the in person stuff. Like I really loved like I started doing the comedy festival in 2016 was my first festival, and it was when there was still a chalkboard at town
yeah.
hall, and there was a real like kind of hub of activity
Yeah.
because potential audience members would come to that chalkboard, scan it for what's coming up in real
Mm,
time, and you'd be able to approach them and go, "Can I interest you in
yeah.
a show?" And I sort of missed that, and I know a big part of that went away because of COVID, and now we can't like at that time have a concentration of
Mm.
people. Do you see ever a return to that model where people can try and sell themselves in real time, chalkboard style?
I don't know. It's interesting. Flyering still absolutely works in Edinburgh, but I just don't know that it does in Melbourne anymore. I don't see, we don't really do it much, just
Yeah.
because people don't seem to be. I know people go around with QR codes. I mean, it's also just trying to cut down on paper and waste and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I don't, some people are really good at it. Um, I'm just not sure that it's the major way of converting. Maybe, I think it might just get a few bums on seats at the last minute, which is always, good. Give it a go. But
Do you think the Flyers have had their day?
well, no, not. I think there's always a space for a flyer. Whether it's sometimes if it's just more like exit flyering a show that where
Mm.
that audience is similar to your audience, or if it's your mate's show and your mate has given you a shout out on stage,
Yeah, I
then
think that's a really good form,
it's
yeah.
good to have a flyer to. Oh, I'm the one they talked about. um,
I had that same
yeah.
moment, but at the same time,
Mm,
this was at a venue where they had good ushers. It wasn't an FMV,
mm,
or maybe it was. It doesn't really matter, but like the ushers obviously have been told to be careful of people exit flyering,
yeah.
but Steen Raskopoulos had just plugged me on stage, so I was
Oh,
like,
you've
"Oh,
got it.
he didn't even tell me he was gonna plug me. This is
Yeah.
exciting." I'm rushing to that door, and the ushers were not happy with
Oh,
me.
no, you've got to exit flyer in those situations,
Mm.
absolutely. Um, yeah, or have a little QR code
But
sitting
you're
on.
totally right. It's tricky, and there's no one sort of prong or of the marketing fork, if I can
Mm,
put an image in
mm.
people's head, that is like this is the be all to end all.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
never going to be flyering. It's never going to be your Facebook ads. But what does seem really tragic for newbies is they are going, oh, I guess I'll put all my money into this, and often it is Instagram marketing
yeah,
with maybe not the best content that they're
yeah.
pushing up, and they're going, "Oh, I'm not seeing any return for that."
Yeah, no, that's hard. I've seen, I have seen people, newer people spend money on adverts and stuff, and it doesn't make much difference. I mean, word of mouth, getting audiences in, like even if it, papering, get it, but not just papering to anyone, getting people like whether they're work friends or people that you know from a sports club or just something, just getting people in who will then talk
I'm glad you said this
really
because I'm
makes a
I'm such an
difference.
advocate for papering, and for
Yeah,
people that don't know the lingo, this is free tickets,
yeah,
getting bums on seats. And I think what happens so often is pride
yeah,
gets in the
yeah.
way of like, I couldn't possibly give tickets away.
Mm,
What if I sell those? And then the night of comes and
yeah,
they've sold 4 tickets. They go,
yeah,
and as someone who's
yeah.
run venues and as someone who I position myself to be a mentor for people, people so often come to me too
Mm,
late and
mm,
they'll say, Marcel, no one's coming to my show tonight, or no one's
mm.
coming to my show in 2 hours' time.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
can I do? I'm like, ask me this a month ago, 2 months ago.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
so much more that we could be doing ahead of time, because even giving tickets away is a tricky
Yeah, I
business.
know it is. It is. Um, you need to be careful, not just open slather giving tickets away because that kind of looks like you're doing badly. But if
Mm.
it's targeted, if people think that they're getting free tickets because of a particular connection to you or something, well, then that's okay.
This
It's
is
just
an
like, oh, I'm lucky. It's an
opportunity. It's a
opportunity.
gift.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
it's
because
exclusive.
it's a shit show.
And because you'd be able to tell us, the people at the top, the
Mm.
big acts, they're doing it as well
Oh,
on the opening
yeah,
weekends.
yeah,
They want to fill up
absolutely.
those empty seats.
Everybody wants those empty seats, but it does seem to be that certainly people are focused on social media followers, but even then, I'll get British American agents contacting me saying, "Oh, please bring my client over. They've got 900,000 followers, blah 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 blah." And it's like, yeah, but where are those followers? And
Yeah,
will they? That's actually one of the things that has really changed. There are a lot of people in the comedy world now who, rather than coming up through open mics and doing stage time and talking with better comedians backstage and getting good at what they do, they've been making content in their bedrooms and
doing it in a bubble.
doing it, yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean it means you could have a lot of followers. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be very good live on stage in front of an audience over an hour.
Mm.
It's and I think, I've seen there have been some people who've come up that way and they've done their first hour and the audience, yes, they've sold tickets, but are those people going to come back next year? I don't think so.
Yeah, and is it
Wasn't a very
is
good
it
show.
what they've already seen as well? Like, here is
Yeah.
the best of stuff that I've already done on the internet, so they
Yeah.
don't have a live act
They don't
necessarily.
no, they don't necessarily, but, it's interesting too, it doesn't necessarily translate always to bums on seats. There was an American who toured recently who allegedly had a massive number of, followers, and I think on the Australian tour, a whole Australian tour sold something like 1,500 seats.
They might be, a lot of them might be
Mm.
bots, a lot of them
Yeah,
might be localized in particular
yeah,
areas. With the comedy festival produces a certain amount of acts, and that's a sort of a bit of a mysterious world for me as an
mm.
indie artist. How does that lineup come to be, the acts that you produce, the ones that
Yeah.
are under the comedy
We
festival banner?
well, and certainly when I started, there weren't many other people. There's only ever been a pretty small number of promoters who produce international artists. So we didn't produce any Australians because that would just be too hard. I wouldn't want to do that.
And it goes against the international part of the
Well,
festival?
no,
Mm.
it's just we'd need how would you choose? That
Mhm,
would be
mhm,
terrible. And also, Australians have got, we want it to be open slather for Australians. So
mhm.
if you're Australian or New Zealander, anyone can participate in the festival. They pay their registration fee, find their own venue, do their own thing. A lot of them have got an agent or a producer or a mate, depending on what stage of their careers they're at, but
Mhm.
it's open slather and they can do that. We do curate the program of international artists. We produce quite a bunch of them, and they're artists that I've seen. They're people that I think are really good. They're not all necessarily famous, but they're people who I think are doing something interesting that is not necessarily duplicated in Australia. What we do
Mhm.
by trying to curate the internet, we say no to so many people, because what's the point in bringing in yet another 10, emerging middle rung young British, because they're mainly British, the ones who want to come
Mhm.
their own steam, who are really no better than what Australians at that level are doing. So why split an existing market, or
Mhm.
why bring out 10 young British white guys who are all doing pretty much the similar thing?
They
You
gotta have
just
a point of
bring out the
difference.
best one
Yeah.
and make sure that at least breaks even.
Mm.
Um,
What is your unique selling
yeah,
point?
so we try and then you come into the thing where you have, by doing people, presenting people like Phil Wang, for example, that helps you pay for doing people like, well, this is in the past looking back,
Mm.
but people like Simon Munnery, who's a
Mhm.
complete comedian's comedian, but never always lost money,
Yeah, right.
but is really important artistically. So we do that. And then there are a couple like Live Nation and Century and, a couple who do present, but they will come to me and say, we want to do so and so and so and so and so and so. And I'll
Mhm.
say, oh, so and so and so and so. I know you're only wanting to do that because you're sucking up to their agent so you can get a big tour in July. So no, but
Yeah.
yeah, that person and that person, they're interesting. They're good. Okay, bring them
Yeah,
in.
so you're having to do a lot of coordination of
Yeah,
money and egos and
yeah.
personalities and
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. It's
And I
really
do really love
tricky.
that balancing act of like, okay, we'll
Mm,
get this person in because like they're arty and
mm,
particular and we love what they do,
mm.
but we need this person to pay the bills. I
Yeah,
know that there was the year that Ursula didn't do her show and that
yeah.
was like a big dent in
Yeah,
in,
oh,
in
that was terrible when
sales
she
for
pulled out of
as a
the
total.
town hall. But overall, she's been incredibly supportive, and
Mm.
that's
But
great.
it's interesting to know. Like I didn't, it
Yeah,
didn't quite click with me at the time that like one comedian can
yeah.
have such an impact on
Oh,
yeah.
in the festival managed venues, for example, the Nazim Hussain selling out the lower town hall is absolutely covering the cost of whoever's doing
Hmm.
6 o'clock in the backstage room,
Yeah. That's how it has
because
to work.
and that's just, and everybody knows that. Well, I don't think all the artists know that, but I'm sure the artists, they do, and that's fine. They started out in one of those little rooms with someone else,
Mm.
really technically paying for them, um, because those costs are enormous, and you need the big sellers to subsidize the little
And it is
sellers.
all expensive. I know you've done an interview in the past of talking about how we're just not getting enough from the government in
Mm.
terms of grants compared to some
Yeah,
other big arts
we
events,
don't.
other cultural events.
Yeah, we get $1.7 million per year from Creative Victoria, which I can imagine there are people going, $1.7 million.
It doesn't go
That
very far.
that's
Mm.
goes nowhere. And you think about what Rising get. I think their funding has actually been reduced for next year down to something like 5 million, but for years they've been getting like 15 million.
Is it's just comedy seen as a lower art form or something?
I think, yes, I think we suffer from, we're kind of a victim of our own success. People just see crowds on the street and they think someone's making money.
Mm.
Um, that's very successful.
I think it's also I find this any even as an individual, if you look like you're doing well,
Mm,
like under like if you're taking care of yourself, they go,
yeah,
"Oh, well, Susan must be fine. Marcel must be fine." It's like I'm waiting for someone to come and help
yeah,
me.
yeah. No,
I can do this, but
yeah,
I would love for you to help lighten
yeah.
the load.
We have such a streamlined, dare I say, staff. All of our staff do the jobs of like three or four people. They just work their
Hmm.
asses off, very long hours and stuff. And I feel bad about that quite often. But they all, they love the art form and they're prepared to do it. But it's not great.
And
It's
love can't
really
pay the
hard work.
bills.
Love doesn't pay the bills, but
While we're just in the FMV world, that's another, because running the comedy writers group, there are a lot of newer comedians interested in, oh my goodness, how does any of this stuff work? And festival managed venues for newbies feel like a bit of another crystal ball. How does it all work
yeah.
behind the scenes type stuff? What are you looking for, or what is the staff looking for when it comes to? Is it are the same sort of metrics in mind of what's unique selling
Mm.
point? I think sometimes people are thinking, "Oh, do I not have enough cloud or social media followers?" How do the new people get a look?
With new people in the FMVs, it's not. I suppose we. Well, I don't really look at their social media followers. We do look at the look. It comes to do we value their work? Do we think what they're doing? Are they working hard? Are they really trying? Are they you know you know getting out and doing gigs and really working and getting better at what they do?
Mhm.
Every year there are a couple of people who they get an FMV and then they just don't really, I'll be looking at the sales every day and thinking, oh God, he's only got 6 people in and no comps, not
Mhm.
even, if they're not even bothering to paper and stuff, I think, well, you won't be getting an FMV
Yeah, yeah.
because you're not even trying.
Because
It's,
that's not gonna snowball into the future, because
no,
I'll often say, one of the good reasons of papering a show, it
yeah.
might not be for tomorrow night's
Yeah.
sales, it might be for next
Yeah,
year's
no,
sales. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, we look because all of our staff and people, and we're listening, we're talking to agents and mates in the industry and stuff, and going to gigs. We see it's firstly, are they doing good work? Do
Mhm.
they deserve this support? Also, FMVs are not the cheapest. We will often say to people, have a bit of a conversation about, can you afford this? You might be able to do the Coopers or do
Do an indie
Spleen or
venue.
do an
Yeah.
indie venue, and it would be cheaper.
Yeah.
Um, we
And they can spend more of what they've
yeah,
saved on marketing and things
exactly.
like
And
that.
some, quite often they'll look at that and go, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, go off. I think, we try and, especially with the newer shows, try and disavow them of that myth that just because you're in an FMV, you're going to sell more tickets because you're not
Which is
necessarily.
really important for them
Yeah.
to hear, because I
Yeah.
think so many of us, and I think comedians are just wired in this way
Mm,
of, once I'm part of this crowd,
mm,
whether it's festival managed venues, whether it's
yeah.
having an agent, whether it's being invited to do this cool gig, whether it's
Mm.
getting on the Comedy Writers Group podcast, whatever, whatever the thing might be, of like, once I have this thing,
Yeah.
things will be different.
Yeah.
And I think FMVs come under that banner. And I'm
Yeah.
really glad you articulated this, because just by being in a festival managed venue doesn't suddenly, oh, you've made it, kid, and now
Yeah.
welcome all these audience members to
Yeah.
your show.
No, it really doesn't. And, the overhead is higher because we do have certain production values and staff. And also, because we are the festival and we're running these venues, we can't get away with stuff that some of the indie venues can,
Hmm.
like health and safety regulations and stuff. We can't squeeze in those extra few chairs that block
Right.
the fire exit. We can't. We have to have.
You've paid your insurance.
Yeah, insurance and staff have to have breaks and dinner break. Just all of that. Um,
Yeah, you can't
there,
be as
there
scrappy as the other
No, there
places.
are cheaper venues,
Mm.
which won't be as well equipped probably, but that might be fine for you if
But
you're
it's
doing your
great
first
because,
stand-up
yeah,
show.
I think the last thing we, like any arts organization, and I've worked a lot with Adelaide Fringe in the future, in the past, they'll be quite realistic to new artists, and I think it's
Yeah.
really important that no arts organization in the world
Mm.
is offering like the world and going, oh,
Yeah.
if you pay this, you'll suddenly see
Yeah.
this return.
Yeah.
It's not going
Yeah.
to happen. What I do want to segue into, in regards to this feeling of, what are we seeing in you now, and what do we sort of predict in your future, of, are you the sort of person that's going to come back year after year? What have you noticed about the comedians that have stood the test of time over the years? Have you noticed
Ah.
particular patterns?
I think the ones that have gone on and they're just eternally curious and genuinely love that connection with the audience, and I guess in a way too um oh, I can't think of the word, but I'm thinking about people, people like Will Anderson, for example, and Dave Hughes, who've been around forever, and you still see them getting up, and doing
Yeah, they're just in their blood.
anywhere. And, there are people that, I've been in New York and seen, late nights at the Comedy Cellar and seeing people just drop in to work out new bits um, but they just love doing,
They have a compulsion.
have a compulsion to do it and just really love that, and they get better, and they're curious, they engage with the world around them, with family, friends, or politics or whatever. And I really like that. That makes them kind of fresh because um, they are still evolving because the world's changing all the time, and
Mm.
how you view that. But um, it is weird that there are people on my staff now who weren't born when I started doing the comedy festival, which I just think that's outrageous.
We're into that phase now. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that's
And you're
Josh
drop
Thomas.
and
Is
you're dropping names where people are like, "What? I
Yeah,
don't know. I have
I
no
know. It's
context for that."
Josh Thomas
Mm,
is as old as the comedy
mm.
festival.
Yeah, and you're also having moments as well where people have had entire careers in that time and
Yeah,
probably called it a day as well.
yeah, yeah,
I've been forwarding in a lot of questions from the comedy writers group. I posted on Facebook that you were coming on. They were very excited.
oh,
Um, this was a question from Jeremy about longevity. Alongside that, Lily had a similar question about longevity in regards to women in the comedy
yeah,
festival. What have you been noticing about women in comedy's experience, and
yeah.
or pretty much just anyone that doesn't identify as a dude, their experience
As
in
a
comedy
straight
festival?
white dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that has changed a lot in my time, and that I'm actually, I'm pleased about, I guess. We started doing the upfront. That was actually started by the Missitchy ladies, and Janet McLeod might have been involved. I can't remember everyone. It was Lyndall McElwain. Um, and then they did the first one, and it was at the Espy Hotel a very long time ago. And then they asked us to take over because it was just like, oh my God, this. so,
This is getting big.
yeah. So we've done that, and that has, of course, grown and grown. And
And what's
now
the upfront for the
up front,
uninitiated?
well, now it used to be women, just
Mm,
all women, best of, but now it's women and non-binary
mhm,
people, and just a big celebration. Because back, when I started there, well, mind you, it still goes on. Well, women aren't funny,
mm.
um, and we started doing. In my time too, we created Geez Louise, which was like more aimed to at trying to get more women. Um, it was a workshop and panel program of getting women involved, being able to talk to their peers and improve their skills, and um, that's kind of involved. Well, it got to the stage where we didn't really need it so much. It had turned
Mhm.
into more of a fan thing coming along to watch rather than the women comedians needing it so
Yeah,
much. So
yeah.
that's sort of changed a bit. Um, but it's something that the eh, like focusing on women are still less than 50% of the program, but boy, it's
You're
much, much
looking at these
closer.
metrics, I
Yeah,
assume,
I
as well.
do
Mm.
look at shows, but certainly shows that are either just women or include women are now much closer to 50% than they were when I started. Although having said that, in the very first comedy, like 1987, etc., some of the highest profile performers in the festival were women. There were people like Wendy Harmer
Mhm.
and Rachel Berger and Linda Gibson and Let the Blood Run Free, which was it became a TV program, but that was a show that had Gene Kitson and Brian Ann Curvis and Peter Rosethorn and Helen. I'm having a mental block. But anyway, there were actually quite a few high profile women, but it was a much, much smaller program. And it was still, they were still a smaller percentage, but I think women in the festival have always been some of the highest profile people in the
Mhm.
festival
Mhm.
because they've always been, we have produced some incredible people. Like when I look at the awards, our awards, we've had certainly more women win our award than way more than the Edinburgh Comedy Award. Like
Oh,
we'd
interesting.
had a number of people, like starting with Miss Itchy and then Sue Ann Post, win our award. And then I was on the panel of the Edinburgh Comedy Awards in the year that the first woman won, which was Jenny Eclair, and I was very proud about that.
Look at that influence. I want to. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but we won't be able to. But there's few things as we round out our time. One of which is, as you said about the size of the program, it gets bigger each
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
How is this sustainable?
Well, this is one of the things we talk to government a lot about because we've got to grow our audience. Like next year, we always have a whiteboard in the office, and all the staff guess how many registrations there's going to be.
Hmm.
And the winner, with all of our awards, speaking of our awards, obviously we make sure that every show is seen. So we have a lot of scouts
Hmm.
to go out. Like the judges can't possibly see every single show. So we have scouts and our staff, and they get
And
sent
to
out to
emphasize there
stuff.
so like there's the judges and then there's like
Scouts
the scouts
who
as
are
well.
who are comedy
Yeah,
aficionados,
but
that
every
and
show
stuff.
is being
But
seen.
every show is being seen. Anyway, if you win on our staff whiteboard, it means you can choose what shows you go and see instead of being sent.
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
So it's
uh-huh.
a good prize. But anyway, last year I think we had what did we have? 690 shows or something. It's well over 700
Yeah,
now
wow.
already for next year. It's going to be really, really big.
It's
Ugh,
so
but we need
competitive
to
to
grow
find venue
audiences.
space and people, and it's growing out into the suburbs as
Yeah,
well
yeah.
now.
We need more tourists. We need money from Visit Victoria. Instead of them spending money on bringing some massive international rock star to Geelong, give money to an existing homegrown thing that is amazing and help
Yeah,
us be sustainable, help us promote to tourists. Because there have been various studies done that have said um, we're not exploiting, there's big opportunity for audiences from Asia and the subcontinent and from New Zealand as well as Britain and North America that we could
yeah.
bring in a lot more tourists, but we can't afford to market to them.
And if tourists are coming, they're coming with that agenda of, well, let's go see as
Yeah,
many things as possible, rather
yeah,
than locals that might see a couple of things
yeah,
across the month.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's like the squillions of people who flood into Edinburgh and
Mm.
they go and see, 6 shows a
It
day.
has a certain gravitational pull.
Yeah, yeah. So we
S-
need help. We need help to build our audience so that the artists who are bringing their shows and risking all of that can actually have a larger audience to call on. Mind you, having said that, we sell 800,000 tickets. What's Melbourne's population of Melbourne is now what? It's almost 5 million or something.
Mm.
So there's still a lot of Melburnians who could come.
Yeah, there's a bit of education required
Yeah.
in all the cities like Adelaide and Melbourne that host these big events.
Mm.
Sydney as well. Sydney is gigantic,
Yeah.
but the Sydney Comedy Festival almost feels boutique
Well, it's kind of
compared.
inner west, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a real shame that it feels that way when you go, well, it's Sydney.
Yeah.
It's a giant city, but no, it doesn't feel that
No.
way for
That's
the festival.
a good thing about Melbourne, opposed to Sydney, is that it's easy to everyone can come into. It's like the big wheel and the
Hmm.
spokes. You can come into the centre.
Yeah.
Whereas Sydney, there is that thing about you're either in the west or the inner west or the outer
Am I
west
gonna
or
am I gonna cross the bridge for
across the
this?
bridge. What am I doing? Yeah.
Well, speaking of looking ahead, the article I read recently with you in it was, I believe, titled something like "I can't do this forever." An admission that you are only human, I suppose. I don't know, that really grabs headlines. I'm
I
not
don't
going to
know.
be
I don't
around
know
forever.
why they did that headline, but anyway,
We're celebrating 40 years of the comedy
comedy festival.
festival, which
Yeah.
is wild.
Yeah.
You've been at the helm for 30 years.
Yeah.
Do you want a break?
Yeah.
Like how
No,
you?
I do. I do. And I am, in chatting with my board about
Mhm.
winding down,
Yeah,
winding back.
one of those. This is one of those movies where you're like secretly looking for a successor, and you're gonna have this moment where you pass the torch or something.
They'll when I know what's happening, we'll
Mm.
yeah.
But
Talk about it.
it's so as I say, having any job, let alone a job like from a comedian's point of view, very important job.
Yeah.
Is 30 years. I don't know if I'll be in anything for 30
No.
years. I hope to be in comedy for 30 years.
Yeah, you'll still be doing comedy for 30 years. But yeah, no, I've been incredibly lucky and I've loved it. And I can't imagine not being involved at all.
Mm.
But yes, the huge thing is there's only so long you can keep doing that.
Well, and also, yeah, like, enjoy yourself, and then you maybe
Mm.
can see more shows that you want to see
Oh, I
as
know,
well.
exactly. Oh no, I always love I very rarely feel I can honestly say this.
Mm.
I very, like I usually see around 110, 120 shows in Edinburgh. And there's usually seriously only 2 or 3 where I'd think, "Oh, I wish I could leave this."
Oh, and that
Yeah.
that's a tremendous attitude to have. As I say, we could have talked for ages. I did look at this one last question that I think is maybe a nice question to end on, which comes from Hugh. He says, "What's some favorite advice that you give or have been given?"
Oh,
I know
um,
it's a big question, but is there any or any whether this also fits into like the mantra world of like what rattles around in your head to keep you going and keep you excited, and keep you curious?
uh I'm just always looking for new things and just I guess you've got to enjoy it. You've got to
Mhm.
find the joy. There's a lot of stuff in my job that is scary. And
Mhm.
I feel like I'm jumping off a cliff
Yeah,
every
the
year
stakes are so high.
because the money's so tight and the stakes are so high. But there is always the joy of just watching a show and enjoying the art. And I think that that never really disappears. And you've got to look for that. You've got to look for the think how lucky you are to be able I think that a lot actually, how lucky we are to be able to go and enjoy our art when you see that, there's an Iranian filmmaker has just been sentenced to jail in absentia for making a film and
Mm.
working with the Indian and um, Indian comedians who are incredible, but we know that a lot of their material they can't do at home because they'd
Mhm.
probably
Yeah, there's been
it would
court
be
cases
quite
about that. Yeah.
dangerous.
Mhm.
You know, we had a gorgeous Bhutanese comedian one year in Comedy Zone Asia who we had to just be really strict about no one recording it because um, if you are gay in Bhutan, you wind up you can get lashed. So
Mm.
so it's we are incredibly lucky that we have the freedom of speech
Mm.
to be able to do what we want with the art form that we love here. And I see that every day working with artists from other countries where it's not quite that easy.
And
And
just being constantly surprised.
yeah,
Yeah.
being constantly
Mm.
surprised and in awe of their bravery, their cleverness. It's um, it's really quite inspiring.
Yeah, that excitement has to be contagious because
Yeah.
it's very hard for us as people who have been doing. I was going to say I'm going to group myself in, but like I've been in comedy for coming up on 15 years
Mm,
and been in the arts for longer. You can start to go ho hum ho hum, but then when you see the excitement
mm,
through other people and you go,
yeah.
oh yeah, that's right, this
Yeah.
rules. This is so exciting to be
And
part of.
it's constantly changing, as
Mm.
we were talking about before. 20 years ago, it was too expensive for most artists to have a screen and do projection in their shows, whereas now everyone's got
Mm.
digital stuff and it's easy and it's cheap. The other just a bit of advice completely on the other side and not nearly
Please.
so warm and fuzzy is, is that I often say to um, various young staff and stuff is that I don't get out of bed before doing a budget. Just don't
Yeah.
make sure you've done a budget. If any genius idea you have, do a budget first so that you're not surprised when you lose all that money.
I'm so glad that you emphasized that because it's one of those things. So many of us are dreamers. We have
Mm,
stars in our eyes,
mm.
and we have a fingers crossed approach
Yeah,
to this year's going to be
yeah.
different, and we have to be brutal with the
You do.
budget.
You've got to
Yeah.
make sure you've got the car to sell or a
Mm.
parent to hit up.
And also, like, what's going to be different about this year? Are you spending more in a particular
Mm,
direction? Yeah. Oh
mm.
man, you hit certain buttons, Susan, that I want to. But this has been really lovely, and thanks for your time.
Oh, no,
And
thank you so much for having me.
And
That was a real
as
fun
someone who
conversation.
is has trouble being, I hope you get I hope you give yourself some pause over the holidays.